Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you. Of course, we are pleased to be joined by the MHSAA Executive Director, Mark Ewell. Mark, how are you?
Casey, good to be with you.
Last time, of course, you did tease that we would need to have you on again at around this time because there was going to be some changes that happened, and sure enough, there were. Let's talk about the two big. There was a few of them, but let's. You guys did something that you haven't done in 20 plus years, and of course, they'll be adding two sports to I believe, the 2025-26 school year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. So we're 2 years out. But boys volleyball clearly was driving that conversation. Our policy that before a sport gets added as a new tournament sport, at least 64 of our schools need to sponsor it on a club basis, which right now that number is nearing 80, and my hunch is that will be right around 100 very, very soon. So boys volleyball, that will be a spring sport. So that will start in the spring of the 2025-26 school year. And of course, even though we right now, Casey, we have one more girls sport sponsored than we do boys sport. Our representative council felt like if we're going to add a boys sport, we needed to also add another girls sport at that same time. And so girls field hockey is coming in as well, and that will be a fall sport also beginning in 25-26. This really isn't all that uncommon from how lacrosse got added back 21 years ago. Boys lacrosse did meet that 64 minimum school requirement when it got added. Girls lacrosse still had not met the 64, but again, we brought both of them in at the same time, and that's really the approach that was being used here.
Yeah. So were there any other sports that were I know there were tons of sports that are being considered. And I think, and could there be possibly, I know that girls flag football is also gaining traction, especially with, with the championships being held this weekend at Ford Field. And I know the NFL has been really kind of putting that thing on. Do you see that possibly coming down the road in terms of sponsorship if it does get more popular?
Yeah, that conversation is going to continue. I think girls flag football, the growth, how quickly that growth is happening. Obviously with the draft being here in Detroit and some of those students who are currently playing flag football on a club basis at some of our schools were on stage with the commissioner. It becoming an Olympic sport. The NCAA, it's becoming a collegiate sport. The challenge we have in our state, Casey, with girls flag football is the season. A lot of our brother and sister states in the South have had flag football now for a number of years, but it's been a winter sport. So the times when your football fields and stadiums are essentially open, that's where that really fit nicely on their calendar. A few more challenges here in Michigan, just given our weather, but I don't see that conversation or topic going away. Boys and girls water polo also got some discussion by the council, as well as a conversation about indoor track and field. Just another thing so I think the conversation about new and emerging sports, if I was speculating, it's not going to be another 20 years go by before we either take action again or at least look very, very closely at what else is out there.
With adding sports, are you concerned with the existing sports like that could, obviously when new sports emerge and people join, it's obviously going to take away from existing sports that are out there.
It is, and that, especially with boys volleyball, what does that do for other spring sports? What does that do to baseball? What does that do to track and field? But yet also know that we currently sponsor a number of sports that our schools don't sponsor. For example, we right now conduct a tournament in swimming and diving. About a third of our schools have swimming and diving, 2/3 do not. For example, tennis. Tennis right now is sponsored by a little bit less than half of our schools. We've sponsored tennis for a long, long time, so it's not like schools are required to do that. So with these two new opportunities that are coming into the fold here in 2 years, schools are going to have to make some local decisions about what is the interest level of our kids, what are our resources in terms of facilities and coaches and all of those kinds of things. So while we may be sponsoring it and offering a tournament at the end of the year, that's still a decision that has to be made locally by each of our school communities.
And you also made some additional changes as well in terms of the winter sports date and a few other things.
We did. So the winter calendar was modified slightly. What we'll see is moving forward is the winter season is going to end a week earlier. So instead of a 5-week winter championship run for our staff, that 5 weeks is going to go down to 4 weeks. So our basketball finals are currently on the 3rd and 4th Saturdays in March. Those, again, not next year, but the year after in 25-26, those will now move up a week to the 2nd and 3rd Saturdays in March. So basically, when it comes to basketball, boys basketball will always start first. Their finals will be at the Breslin Center on the weekend of the Big Ten tournament, with then the girls' finals being that following weekend, which is the opening weekend, typically of the NCAA tournament. Wrestling, for example, their season did not shift because of Monster Jam. Monster Jam is always the last weekend in February at Ford Field. Well, we couldn't move our individual finals from the first weekend or the first weekend of March up. So the key things that we've been hearing for a number of years is the winter season lasts too long. We didn't do anything with the number of games. We didn't do anything with final venues and those things. But what we did try and do is just shrink that window slightly, just to try and make the winter season more manageable. Because really, Casey, schools right now are taking their spring break earlier than ever. It used to always be that first full week of April. Well, if we're not getting our winter tournaments done by that last week of March, it really is conflicting with spring break. So that was also part of the conversation as well.
Okay. Really, any other changes that were notable, or just those three?
Those were, I think, the biggest changes. Again, calendar and those new opportunities were probably the two big headlines coming out of the May Council meeting. Some sport by sport tweaks and changes, but nothing I think that is going to stop the presses, so to speak.
Okay. Is I know they were talking about, I know a lot of committees like basketball. I know football sent something possibly over. Is there any changes from individual sports that you guys took up?
So I think with the two you just mentioned, so two big changes. One in football is the fact that we've now got a Division 8 250 student cap. So not this current fall, but next fall, all of our Division 8 11-player schools, if you're 250 students or less, you'll automatically be in Division 8. And then what we'll do is with the remaining schools, we'll divide them into 7 equal divisions. And then on both basketball and soccer, the big change there, Casey, is we're seeding now the entire district. So instead of just seeding 1 and 2 and dividing the bracket, we're now going to seed the entire district, 1 through 6 or 1 through 7 using MPR. So that was passed by both the basketball and soccer committees.
Okay. Other than that, I mean, is there possible like things that you guys maybe possibly tabled for the next time you could possibly make some big decisions, or what else could possibly be on the horizon that these different sports may have recommended to you guys?
So our sport committees, they'll start meeting again in the fall. And, so we don't take ideas from this year and table them for ideas that were discussed in committee this year, which didn't get passed. They'll really start back in committee again next year. And our committees each year, half of the committee membership turns over. So in other words, if you're on one of our sport committees and you've got to be a full-time school employee as an administrator, teacher, and obviously those that serve as coaches. So half. If it's a committee of 16 people, you have a 2-year term, but each year, 8 of those 16 rotate off. So you've got some continuity, but yet you've also got 8 new and fresh voices coming on. So we'll see where all of our sport committees start next year as we continue to try and push the envelope forward.
Yeah. So really going into, I know it's that time of the year where, things are the spring tournaments are almost upon us. I believe some of them start today. And with of course with I believe boys and girls lacrosse start their tournaments today, and of course with baseball and softball, girls soccer starting, and of course track and field. We've already had some regionals, and state finals is going to be coming up in that and not too far down the road. What are we looking forward to with those as we kind of close out the year?
Good weather. Like you said, tournament time is here. We're less than a month away. All in all, a very smooth school year. To be honest, Casey, even my really bad days right now, I just think, well, we could be having a pandemic right now.
Yeah,
It's
pretty much.
amazing the perspective that gives us. But no, really, really solid year. Attendance has been really, really strong again this year, and the spring is always fun because you are outdoors. I think it's some of the best weather that we have all year here in Michigan. So the finish line is in sight, and hopefully we'll have an uneventful finish to that finish line.
Is there anything? Of course, obviously the big news is lacrosse finals are going to be at the University of Michigan's lacrosse stadium.
Yep.
What's that going to be like for you guys?
Really good. I think, that sport, we've always had the finals held separately at good high school facilities. But I think with, lacrosse really becoming, getting, at least I shouldn't say lacrosse becoming, a higher profile sport, because Casey, any East Coaster who's watching this would say, well, for years, lacrosse has been a huge deal out on the East Coast, but I think you're seeing it really grow and finding a foothold in the Midwest. And now by having our championships at really a phenomenal Big Ten facility, I think that's only going to make what's been a good sport for us even better.
Yeah. Um, Really, things to look for. What are some things that we need to look forward to? What goes on with you guys once the tournaments end? What does the summer look like for you guys?
It's a blur. So most of our fall planning is already done. For example, in the last 2 weeks, we've already had our committees that have met to identify volleyball groupings and host sites. Actually, we've already had our basketball grouping and host site meeting that's occurred already. So typically, we're always planning 6 to 9 months in advance. So when folks think, well, gosh, the summer must be spent with planning for fall, most of the planning for fall is already done. During the summer, it's really more looking at winter and spring. Yeah, to me, the only slow time of the year, Casey, is about a week. It's the week before Christmas in December. Other than that, almost in a week, maybe over the 4th of July. The other 50 to 52 weeks out of the year, things really don't slow down for our staff.
Are we expecting any really big changes as we head into the fall, or is everything, as once we start football season or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't think there's really any huge changes that folks would see ahead of the fall. Some minor eligibility tweaks, some minor sport changes, but I still think, Casey, we're in a little bit of a mindset that really still coming out of COVID. A few years of stability and kind of business as usual has been something that a lot of our school people have really wanted.
Absolutely. All right. And well, Mark, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for the time as always, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Casey. Always good to be with you.